there, and welcome to the 9th Night of the Movies podcast, where I talk movies, TV, and all things I want for about half an hour to an hour, once or twice a week. And today I am once again flying solo, as Lewis is still unfortunately quite busy, but I'm flying solo as I do my review of Lord of the Rings of Power, and also as I briefly talk about She-Hulk towards the end of this podcast, because I did finish the show a couple of days ago now, and I was considering doing a full review of it, but quite frankly at the moment I don't have the time, and also if I did do a full review of She-Hulk, it would just be me complaining about it for half an hour straight, and I don't really want to make another rant video at the moment. I made, 2 of them recently, and I'm not too bothered about making another rant video on this channel for a while, I'm not going to lie. And I don't like making videos where I just complain about things non-stop. It kind of frustrates me when I do those videos, to be honest. I don't like being one of those YouTubers who's constantly complaining about things. In fact, I like praising stuff. I like talking about the positives about films, TV all the time. And so yes, I am talking about She-Hulk, I am talking about it, but towards the end of this podcast, and only briefly as well, because I don't want to go on a big tangent about it, and if I leave it towards the end of this podcast, I know, well, hopefully I'll only talk about it for about 10 minutes at the most, and then just leave it there. But yes, I'm doing that towards the end of this podcast, but predominantly this podcast is all about my thoughts on Lord of the Rings of Power. But before I get into all of that, I should say that if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there for podcast listeners, then you can also watch it visually on YouTube at the Night of the Movies YouTube channel. And also, if you are watching on YouTube, hello there to people watching on YouTube, but heck, you just don't have time to watch the full podcast on YouTube, then you can listen to it on Spotify at Night of the Movies on Spotify. It's that simple. And likewise, if you enjoy this podcast, then please do feel free to like and subscribe down below if you're watching on YouTube, and also do the same if you're listening on Spotify, and also leave some feedback as well, and tell me what I need to work on. Maybe you want me to be more concise with my thoughts, or maybe you want the podcast to be short, maybe you want it to be longer, and if you do, that's great as well. So please do leave some feedback from me on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, and also, give me some ideas of topics to talk about in the future on this podcast as well. Maybe you have some movie news you want me to talk about, and if you do, please let me know in the comment section below on YouTube, or even in the feedback section on Spotify, and hopefully I'll get around to talk about it in the near future on one of these podcasts. But for now, I'm talking about Lord of the Rings of Power, and briefly about She-Hulk a bit later on. But first, like I said before, I'm talking about Rings of Power, the new Lord of the Rings show. So basically, I'm not going to get into too much spoilers, let's just say off the bat. I'm not going to do spoilers off the bat, I'm not going to do spoilers straight away in my review of this show. And also, I should say why I'm reviewing it on a podcast instead of doing a full half an hour video, reviewing the show as a whole, like I could normally do with most TV shows, or I could normally do with any film. Normally when I do a film review, I've got a different background, and I'm sitting there, and you guys can see that, but normally I'm sitting there, got the camera facing the back of the wall, and you guys can still see the back of the wall if you are watching on YouTube. But at the same time, no, I'm sitting in a different place than I usually would if I was doing a film review or a TV review. But the reason I decided to do my Rings of Power review as a podcast is because one of the big reasons, actually, I should say off the bat, is that I didn't have any other ideas for a podcast this week, so I thought, let's just do my Rings of Power review in a podcast. But the other reason, and perhaps the biggest reason, is because I sometimes get a bit stressed, and it's me being completely honest here, pulling back the curtain, if you will. Sometimes I get a bit stressed doing film reviews and TV reviews on this channel, because often when I do them and I have the camera facing me, I forget about a lot of stuff I want to say, because I don't have my laptop there. Like today, I've got my laptop here to help me with notes, and so I don't forget things in my Rings of Power review, or even when I'm talking about She-Hulk a bit later, because when I reviewed Amsterdam the other day, that was my latest film review on this channel, I finished my review and I was editing, and I was thinking, I forgot about all this stuff that I want to talk about in Amsterdam, like how so many scenes just meander and don't have any point to them, and all these different things I want to talk about with Amsterdam. I can't remember off the top of my head right now because I had all the notes on my phone, and on my phone on me right now because of the point I'm making. You know, sometimes I just forget, and I get really annoyed at myself, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes, you know, after I've done a film review or done a TV review, and I look at my phone after my notes that I made on the film or TV show that I just watched, and I didn't bring up half the points. So I wanted my laptop here with me whilst I did my review of Rings of Power, so I remember to talk about certain aspects of the show which I liked and which I disliked, because there's a lot in this series that I really want to talk about, and I felt that if I just did, you know, a normal TV review, then I would have forgotten a lot of stuff. I would have forgotten to talk about a lot of aspects of the show, and then that would have kind of annoyed me because I don't have chances really in the next couple of weeks because I'm so busy to talk about Rings of Power again, or maybe on another podcast. But I don't want to do 2 podcasts on Rings of Power. You know, I don't like talking about one topic too much, unless it's Star Wars. If it's Star Wars, then that's fine with me, because I love Star Wars. That's my #1 love in the world. But at the same time, no, you know, I don't want to talk about Rings of Power continuously. I want to do one video on it and just move on to the next thing. So that's why I'm talking about Rings of Power in this podcast instead of doing it. That's why I'm doing my Rings of Power review in this podcast instead of doing a review of it like I'd usually do of any other TV show, any other film, because there's things I want to bring up, and I'm afraid if I did it as a normal film review, I would have forgotten to bring those things up. I would have forgotten to bring these certain aspects of the show up. And also, this is kind of a trial one as well. My review of Rings of Power in this podcast is kind of a trial one, because I kind of want to get into podcasting a bit more, and I kind of want to do my reviews like this, where I can have my laptop there and my notes instead of doing it without my notes, because I don't know, it's more stress-free, to be honest, and at the moment that's kind of a brighter way of looking at doing these reviews, I'm not going to lie. That's me pulling back the curtain there and giving a bit of insight into myself and getting a bit honest as well, and, you know, showing a different side to me perhaps, but that's the truth. This is kind of a trial one to do more reviews like this on the channel in the future. Maybe I'll do most of my TV reviews like this as well, because yeah, this is a bit more stress free. But also, if you don't like this sort of reviewing and you want me to go back to my other reviewing when I'm trying to remember things off the top of my head like I'd usually do with any other film review or any other TV review, then please let me know in the comments below. And also though, if you do like this sort of viewing though, where it's a bit more casual, a bit more informal, I have my notes there, and it's just kind of me talking about the show, and maybe there isn't a certain order to it. If you do like this sort of viewing though, please also let me know in the comment section below, or let me know in the feedback if you are listening to this on Spotify. Ooh yeah. But anyway, that's why I'm doing my Rings of Power review in this podcast instead of doing a full-on review of it. I've rambled on for quite a bit there, hopefully you get why. But yes, that's why I'm doing my Rings of Power review in this podcast today. So without further ado, let's get into it. And let's talk all about Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Powers. Rings of Powers, Rings of Powers. I said Rings of Powers, didn't I? I meant Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. So basically, if you don't know already, the show follows a number of different characters from different races in Middle-earth. So you have like the Half-Foots, you have the Dwarves, you have the Elves, and you have many other characters as well. And it follows all of them and this magical being called the Stranger, who all get intertangled with one another as evil approaches and the mystery of Sauron becomes ever more intriguing in this new Middle-earth, in Amazon's Rings of Power Middle-earth, if you will. And that's essentially the gist of the show. There's evil approaching, and we know Sauron's out there somewhere. We don't know who he is yet, and we might find out as the series goes on. If you haven't watched the show yet, I'm not giving everything away. I'm trying to keep the review spoiler-free. But, well, spoiler-free up to a certain point. I will talk about some spoilers as the podcast goes on, but still, nonetheless, you know, we might find out who Sauron is, but at the same time, no, when the show starts, we don't. And there's all this mystery, there's all these things happening, and we don't really know why. And loads of storylines get intertwined with each other, and there's an evil approaching, and that's essentially the gist of the show. Hopefully you understood it there. Don't have to explain myself well whatsoever, but yes, Rings of Power, there's evil approaching. That's the main drive of the show. That's basically it. And honestly, I've got to admit, I quite liked Rings of Power. I did. I've seen the full series now. I watched the last episode of series 1 yesterday, and I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I don't love it, and sure, it's not on the same level, pardon me there, and sure, it's not the same level as, you know, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy or Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy, in my opinion, because I've got to admit, I love the Hobbit films. I love them unconditionally. Like, I don't care what anyone says. And I am one of those people that think that you should like what you like and let no one else say you otherwise. Because I love the Hobbit films so much. And I think the director's cuts of them, the extended versions as well, make those films even better. Particularly with the third Hobbit film, The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies. Because there's all this stuff with the goats in The Battle of Five Armies, by the way. Side note here. There's all this stuff with the goats in the third Hobbit film, in the big battle, and when you watch the theatrical cut, it's kind of like, where the hell did the goats come from? But then when you watch the extended cut, there's this whole fantastic, you know, chariot sequence with the goats, which explains it so well. Granted, the extended edition of the third Hobbit film is more gory than the theatrical cut, which might be more up your street, and to be honest, it was more mine than the third Hobbit film. But at the same time, though, I do think that I love the Hobbit films so much, and I think the extended editions make those films even better, and I also love the Lord of the Rings films as well. I think they're absolutely amazing, and I think Return of the King is simply one of the best movies of all time. Honestly, every single time I watch that film, it makes me so sad. Actually, I'm going to watch this Christmas now, because usually my family has it on at Christmas, but I prefer watching Star Wars instead, because I watch Star Wars, you know, every year around Christmas as well. But at the same time, no, I haven't actually seen the Lord of the Rings films the past couple of years, and I'm going to go and watch them this year anyway. But yeah, that was a bit of a tangent there about the Lord of the Rings movies, but that just shows you how much I love them, and how much the Hobbit trilogy and the Lord of the Rings films, and how much, you know, Peter Jackson's Middle-earth saga, if you will, means to me it means to me. Those films mean so much to me, especially the Hobbit movies, I'm not going to lie, because those films were films I went to go watch at cinema when I didn't go to cinema that often. So yes, those films mean the world to me. They really do. And so I was going to Rings of Power, and I've already spoken about this on the YouTube channel. I did my video about my anticipation for Rings of Power a couple of months ago now. And so I was going into Rings of Power, just hoping for it to be good, though. Like, I didn't need those films. I didn't need the show to be good as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I just wanted something that was satisfying and that was enjoyable and that kept me watching each week, because the show came out weekly, and that's what Rings of Power did. By no means is it masterful, and I don't love it, and I kind of wish that I did, I'm not going to lie. But it's good. And the reason it's good is because I watch the show every Friday after I come back from uni. Like, I have these long days in uni at Friday. I have these long days at university on a Friday where I'm in there from like 9 till 4:30, and then I don't get home till about 7 o'clock, I'm not going to lie, in the evening. And so when I sit down to watch Rings of Power, you know, I was always looking forward to it. I'd have these long days at university, then I'd come home and I would sit down and I would quite enjoy myself with Rings of Power. I'd look forward to watching each episode weekly, which shows you that I enjoyed it. Because if I didn't look forward to every episode, then I would have enjoyed it. I would have been a bit like, oh god, here we go again. But I never felt like that. And in fact, if I didn't enjoy the show, I wouldn't have kept watching it, you know, every single week. How long was it on for? About 7 weeks, because the first 2 episodes came out together. So yeah, I wouldn't have watched it for 7 weeks if I didn't enjoy it. And also, I went along with the characters, and I liked this new version of Middle-earth that Amazon created for the show. I mean, I know it's not Amazon who are the showrunners, I forgot the guy's name who showrun Rings of Power, but you get the point I'm making. I like this new version of Middle-earth that we see in Rings of Power. It's not the same version of Middle-earth that we see in Peter Jackson's Middle-earth saga, but it is something which feels adjacent to that. It feels like the cousin, if you will, to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films. It feels like an extension of that, but also its own thing. It feels like its own beast, and I really like that about Rings of Power. The fact that it didn't just the fact that they didn't just try and copy, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, because, Lord of the Rings trilogy is one of the greatest trilogies of all time, in my opinion. So, the Godfather trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, and is there any off the top of my head right now, the Dark Knight trilogy as well. It's up there as one of the best trilogies of all time, in my opinion. And, Return of the King, the final film of that franchise, won how many Oscars? From like 10 or 11? It was crazy. Like, it won everything, including Best Picture. So, I didn't want it to copy those movies. Those movies don't exist, and they're spectacular, amazing, they're astonishing. And so the fact that Rings of Power tries to do something different, sure, at first had me scratching my head, but at the same time, though, that grew on me as the series went on. I'm not going to lie, I liked the fact that Rings of Power was different. But at the same time, though, like I did briefly mention just then, at the start of the show, the fact that it was different did have me scratching my head. And I do think that Rings of Power I think it takes a bit of time to find its footing. Much like this podcast today, actually. I just started to relax into this podcast now. Sometimes I get a bit, nervous before I start a podcast, but still nonetheless, you get the point I'm making. I do think that Rings of Power does take a bit of time to find its footing and really get into the meat of the story. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the first 4 episodes, but they weren't captivating me and as compelling as I wanted them to be. They weren't groundbreaking TV. And I'm not saying the whole show was groundbreaking, but they just weren't as good as I wanted them to be. I was enjoying them, but I wasn't loving them. I didn't think they were great. And then I got to episodes 5 and 6, and I was like, that's the show. You've got into the meat of the story now. And I feel that when episodes 5 and 6 happened, they really started to move the show at a different pace. They started to take the show in a different direction, a direction which I personally really, really enjoyed, because there was these different themes going on there, and we got introduced to more of the villains. I forgot what the guy's name is now, but that elf who is like, they tried to turn into an orc and it didn't work so well. When he's introduced, I was like, yes, this is what I want to see more from the show, because my favourite part of Lord of the Rings films, one of my favourite parts anyway, not my favourite part, but one of my favourite parts is all the orcs, and so I wanted to see how the orcs and how evil was represented in the show, and I love how they did that. Also the fact that the orcs weren't CGI, by the way. Like, even though I do love the Hobbit films to pieces, I don't care what anyone says, like what you like, and let no one else tell you otherwise, even so I do love the Hobbit films to pieces, my one big criticism of them is that the orcs are CGI. I think they're done with motion capture, kind of like, Andy Serkis's Gollum in Lord of the Rings films, and also in the first Hobbit movie as well. They're kind of done with motion capture, I think. And I don't think it had the same effect as the orcs in the Lord of the Rings films, because they were practical, they were people in costumes, and they looked real, and every time an orc was on screen in the Lord of the Rings films, you were terrified because they looked scary. And in Rings of Power, the orcs are, they're not CGI, which I really loved. I mean, the Wogs are, which, the orc dogs, well, that's fine. They're Wogs. You can't actually get real live Wogs, so that was understandable. But at the same time, no, I love the fact that the orcs looked real and that they actually looked threatening, in my opinion. And I love how they were introduced as well. The fact that they were kind of just, like, hiding in the shadows, and, like, we knew they were there, but we just didn't know where they were as well. And, yeah, I feel that the show found its footing with episodes 5 and 6, and then episode 7 I really liked, episode 8 I really liked as well. I thought the show had a really good ending, not a brilliant ending, I'm not going to lie, but a good enough ending. And that's kind of how I feel the show overall. Like, I don't want a lot more to say, and I sound like I was rounding up there, I'm not. But, I feel the show is good fun. I like it. It's like, I'll probably compare Rings of Power to the Willow film directed by Ron Howard starring Warwick Davis. They're both kind of joyful, optimistic fantasy adventures, and I like that about them. I'm not going to compare to House of the Dragon too much in this video. In fact, this will probably be my only comparison to House of the Dragon, the ongoing Game of Thrones series currently on right now. I'm not going to compare too much to House of the Dragon in this review, but the thing is, though, House of the Dragon is quite a taxing show. It involves your attention the entire time, and it's a slow burn, and there's a lot, in House of the Dragon it's more about the politics of the kingdom, and it's more about, who's sleeping with who, it's the affairs, it's who's gonna be the rightful heir to the throne, and things like that. And, House of the Dragon is more depressing. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not going to give my opinion on House of Dragon just yet. I'll do that in my review of this show coming sometime next week. But at the same time, though, you know, House of Dragon is more depressing and it's more downhearted. Whilst Rings of Power is, you know, on the other spectrum. It's on the other side of the spectrum. It's light-hearted, it's fun, it's exciting in my opinion, and it has this joyful optimistic sense about it, which I really like in there. And I'd probably compare it to Will, like I said before. And you know, we've got the Will TV show coming out in the next couple of weeks as well, which I'm really looking forward to. So there's your link to Willow there. But anyway, you get the point I'm making. You know, I kind of like House of Dragon. I kind of like Rings of Power sensibility. I like its sensibility, the fact that it does feel fun and that it doesn't feel too, you know, dark. But then when it does go dark, it does it well. And I thought that each episode was well directed. I really enjoyed the performances, and also I think the characters are all interesting to varying degrees. Like, I'm not gonna lie, when you have a show with this many characters in, you're gonna have some characters which are better than others, and you know, I do feel that is the case with Rings of Power. Like, my favourite character is, and yeah, well, I was about to say if you know me, you know what I'm about to say there, but yeah, the chance that you're not going to know me, but still, nonetheless, you know, my favourite character in Rings of Power is Jorin, the dwarf. I love him so much, and I love his relationship with Elrond as well, and the little moments between them two throughout the show, like in the second episode, I think it is, when you first see them talk to one another. And you know, Jorin is it Jorin or is it Dorin? I'm going to say Jorin for the sake of this review. But you know, Jorin is angry that Elrond didn't go to his wedding, and then they kind of make up, and you see how Elrond was actually affected by that. It's like, actually, you know what? I was a bit of an idiot. I should have been at his wedding. And I loved that relationship and how that relationship, you know, blossomed, if you will, throughout the rest of the series. And I also like the little moments of comedy between them two, like when Jorin is saying to Elrond, "That's my table," when he's having a dinner with all the elves one night, and then Elrond says to him, you know, later on in the episode, "That's not actually your table. It's not actually a table made by the dwarves." He's like, "No, I made it up, but you guys believe me." Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm paraphrasing badly, but you get the point. I love all the little moments between them two, and also when they're mining together, and just how the relationship, you know, although comical in some moments in the show, is also taken seriously. It's not just made to be a constant joke. You do also have these moments between them two, like when Jorin is sticking up for Elrond to his father, and I feel those moments really make that character bond shine. And I do think, you know, a lot of other people as well, other people who perhaps aren't the biggest fans of Rings of Power, have taken to that relationship as well, from what I've seen online. And so I do think Series 2 is going to focus on that relationship a lot more, which I'm really looking forward to. And also, I love the Harfoot storyline. I don't understand why people complain about that. I found all the stuff through The Stranger, and if you've seen the show, you know what I mean there. I found all the stuff through The Stranger really compelling. And I was constantly guessing, like, I'm not going to lie, I guessed correctly after the first episode. Like, is it the end of the first episode we see him come down to Earth? Or is it the second episode? I can't remember. But when we first see the character, I was kind of like, oh, it's going to be, should I say it? Because I was right. I would have given away that I was right. So, yeah, okay. Spoiler here in case you haven't seen Rings of Power and you're intending to watch it, but you haven't got around to watching it yet. Spoiler here for Rings of Power. When Gandalf first came down to Earth, I was like, when the Stranger first came down to Earth, I was like, oh, that's Gandalf. And throughout each episode, more and more, you know, starting to reinforce my theory that it was. And also, my brother points out to me that it would make perfect sense for it to be Gandalf, because the Stranger first meets the Harfoots, and from what I've heard, the Harfoots are kind of like a descendant of the Hobbits, so it makes sense for Gandalf's story to start with the Hobbits in Rings of Power, and then end with the Hobbits in Return of the King. When, you know, Gandalf goes with Bilbo and Galadriel on that boat at the end of Return of the King. Spoiler alert there for Return of the King in case you haven't seen it, but that film came out in 2003, so you've had loads of time to go and see it, but still, nonetheless, you know, you get what I'm trying to say, that I guessed it was Gandalf, and when it got revealed in the last episode, even though it wasn't completely revealed, and there's an argument that it's still open to some interpretation, it's Gandalf. It is. He even says that line, like he says in the second Hobbit film, Desolation of Smaug. There's something about when you're lost, follow your nose, or something like that. I forgot what the line is now. And also, he was talking about that translation, that those weird people in white, when they showed up and they said something to him, and he was talking about the translation in the last episode. Again, if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. I'm really bad at explaining things like that, but still, yeah, when he's talking about the translation, he says, oh yeah, the one wise wizard or something, and it's heavily implied it's Gandalf. He even looks like Gandalf. That's one of the things, when he popped up, when the stranger first popped up on the show, I was like, he looks like Gandalf, he looks like Ian McKellen, and by the end of the series, he's even talking a bit like Ian McKellen, you know, who played Gandalf in the Hobbit films and in Lord of the Rings movies, and by the way, played him beautifully. I think Ian McKellen's performance as Gandalf is a highlight in all of the Middle-earth movies, whether it's the Hobbit movies or in Lord of the Rings films. And I love the fact that Gandalf's in this show, because I do think the show needed a Gandalf, and now we've got it. And I really liked that about it. It's just, you know, now we've got him in the show, and I really liked that about it. And I'm just really happy that I guessed that I'm just really happy that my theory was right with Gandalf being the stranger in Rings of Power. Because often I'm not right about my theories when it comes to TV shows. But I was right with Rings of Power. I was correct, and I was really happy about that. But also, like I said before, I was interested in the villains of the show, and the whole stuff through who is Sauron. It could it be this character? Could it be him? Could it be the stranger? Could it be these people who are popping up throughout the series? Could it be someone we haven't even met yet? And then it turns out, again, spoiler here in case you haven't seen Rings of Power, but you intend to watch it, haven't got seen it yet. Spoiler here, it turned out to be Hellbrand. And I like that in there. I must admit, I do think the reveal could have been done a bit better. I'm not going to lie. You know, I do think that it wasn't built up as much as perhaps it could have been. But I liked how the reveal was done, and there's that shot in the last episode when you cut to a flashback, where it cuts like a vision of Galadriel and Hellbrand on the boat again, which refers to episode 2 of the series, and you know, it goes into reflection, the shot goes into reflection, you see Sauron and Galadriel in the reflection, you know, Sauron's got his, you know what, he's got his crown on, if you will, and I just, God, I loved, well, I didn't love it actually, I loved that shot though in the show, I loved that shot, but I didn't love how the reveal was done. I do think the whole reveal with Hellbrand being Sauron could have been done better, but I like now that we know who Sauron is, so going to the next series, they could do some really interesting stuff with that, because not everybody knows that Hellbrand is Sauron. So what it could do is like have, perhaps, I don't know, the Half-Foot run into him, the Half-Foot like run into Hellbrand, and they think he's a good character, but then he turns out to be evil and kills them all. Perhaps. I'm not saying, you know, the show's going to go in that direction. And actually, that'd be quite depressing, not going to lie, and quite a sad episode. But you get the point I'm making. The show could do something like that now. And I really like the whole idea that we know who the villain is, but not everyone in the show does. And I'm looking forward to the show having a main villain for its second series. I think the second series of Rings of Power could be amazing. I'm not gonna lie, because we have a main villain now. We didn't have a main villain at the start of the show. A lot of the start of the first, you know, a lot of the first 4 episodes of Rings of Power was setting up this world, was setting up this version of Middle Earth that we see in the show. And now that we have our main villain, that we have, you know, our other antagonist to go with him, his, you know, what do people call it, the henchman, if you will. The other guy who led the Orcs in episode 6, in the big battle episode. I love the fact that we have our main players now. We have all of them. We know who Sauron is. We know who Galadriel is. We already knew who Galadriel was at the start of the series, but we now know, you know, that she knows about Sauron. We now know that she knows who Sauron is. So we now have that conflict because Sauron and Galadriel got to know each other throughout the series. I love that we've got all these different things going on in the show. I love that we've got all these different things going on in the show now, and that we can just get into the. We can just get into it straight away with Series 2. Hopefully, Series 2 doesn't have any, you know, dull moments or any, you know, moments where it's lulling about going, oh, look at the sky up there, or any moments where, you know, the Half-Foots are picking berries out of the trees like they were in the first episode. Like, I didn't mind that, I'm not going to lie, but I'm hoping we don't have more of that. I'm hoping we don't have any, like, you know, just moments that just feel a bit, what's the right word, inconsequential in the grand scheme of things in the next series. I'm hoping every single moment is integral, has, you know, this riveting sense to it, this narrative drive, and I'm hoping we're going to get that now, because we know who our main players are, we know who Sauron is now, and so we can just get into it and get into some really exciting storytelling. So I do think Series 2 is going to be better, and another reason I think Series 2 is going to be better than Series 1 in Rings of Power And by the way, I'm saying this as somebody who likes Series 1 quite a lot. I think it's really good TV. But another reason I think that Rings of Power Series 2 is going to be better is because I feel the showrunners going to be more confident. Because they're going to, be able to take on board all their criticism, valid criticism. There's some people online who are not giving the show valid criticism. They're just criticising it because it has people of a different ethnicity in there, or the fact that it has, powerful female characters as well. Who are just criticising it for the sake of criticising it. I just want to say to them, fuck off. But the showrunners of the show can work on all the valid criticism and perhaps make the show even better with its second series. That's what I hope. Most second seasons of a show, in my opinion, are actually better than the first series. I think that's the case with the Sherlock TV show. I think that's the case with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, in my opinion, actually got better as the series went on because they were to build on what made each series better. With the exception of the last series, actually, let's just say that. Okay, it was good up to season 7, but yeah, I think Rings of Power could really be something special series 2 because we've laid the groundwork down now, and I do feel that if the second series is just, doing more groundwork, I'm going to be a bit like, yeah, you don't need to do this. We have our main players, let's get into more to the meat of the story, because I felt the show took 5 episodes to do that, and not that the first 4 episodes were bad, but at the same time though, I kind of want Rings of Power to be a bit more to the point next series. That's what I'm trying to say. That I want it to be just more snappy. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully. But anyway, yes. Not sure I've explained myself well whatsoever there. But yeah, I think all the characters are interesting to varying degrees. I must admit, I'm not the biggest fan of all the stuff in Numenor. Like, I've got to be honest there, because Numenor looks very CGI. And what I mean by that is it doesn't look real enough. It doesn't look like, I don't fully believe in Numenor, the world where you have characters like Isildur. I might pronounce his name wrong. I've literally got the characters' names up here because I can't remember off the top of my head. And that's not because I think the characters are uninteresting or badly written. It's just simply because I'm not good with names of characters from fancy TV shows or fancy films. It's just the way I am. Honestly, I can only remember like 4 characters' names from House of Dragons, so yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of the character of Bronwyn. Again, thinking about that right, and Arondir. I don't love those characters yet, and I do think there could be more thought put into their characterizations, but I feel they're characters that could be built on as the series goes on, and all the stuff in Numenor that doesn't actually involve Arondir or Bronwyn, but all the stuff in Numenor, I just feel it's not as interesting to me as all the other stuff, because all the other stuff I do feel is, all the stuff with Joan and Elrond and all the stuff to do with the Stranger is actually compelling in my opinion. In Numenor, I'm kind of like, yeah, it just looks like a big CGI sort of kingdom that, it's not in the Lord of the Rings films. So I'm guessing, and I haven't the books here, I'm guessing that it's not going to be around, come, the second age or the first age of Middle Earth that we're into with the Hobbit films and Lord of the Rings films. I don't even know, to be honest. Like I said before, I don't even know the lore of Lord of the Rings that much, but I don't know, I'm struggling to get myself invested into all the stuff going on with Numenor. I'm not gonna lie, I just feel it's not brilliant. Like, that's one of my criticisms. I feel that all the stuff in Numenor could have been done better, and like I said before, I feel the characters of Arondir and Bronwyn and that romance going on there between the elf and the woman who lives in this kind of like peasant-like town that we see in the show. Hopefully not what I'm talking about. I'm not explaining myself well whatsoever, but I do feel that all the, quote-unquote human characters in this show, if you will, could have had more characterization surrounding them, and perhaps could have been written a bit better and aren't as interesting as, say, the Stranger or the Harfoots or, Joan or Elrond or Hellbrand or Galadriel or, that sort of stuff. I just don't feel they're as interesting as all the other things going on in the show. So whenever I go back to those characters, I'm like, yep, I just remembered you're this series, you know what I mean? Like, Yeah, I can't explain myself well. I've had a long week and I'm not feeling myself today. I'm not feeling like myself today, but yeah, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. But let's look at some of the other stuff I've written here. I did talk about Numenor. I also wasn't too big, like I said before as well, about all the stuff, all those peasant-like people getting ready to fight Sauron, because it didn't feel quite as compelling as I think the show wanted me to find it. And I thought the battle there in episode 6 between the peasant human characters, that's not their names, but Bronwyn and all those sort of characters, who are rising up to fight the orcs because they know they're coming, and you have the elf there as well, Arondir. I feel that all that stuff was fine, and I feel it was at its best in episode 6, and mostly because the big battle happened there. I'm not gonna lie, I thought the big battle in episode 6 was done really well and it was really exciting, was spectacular to watch. But I felt everything leading up to it just could have been more riveting, like I said before. I don't know, it could have had more of the narrative thrust to it. And also, is there anything else that I wanted to say? I mean, there's actually quite a lot of stuff that I want to say, but anything I wanted to say on the positives. Other than the fact that I've already said before, I did find the show to be optimistic though, and it did make me smile, and I look forward to watching it every Friday evening. It's just, yeah, I do feel some of the storylines could be a bit better. And also, like I said before, I felt the show just take a bit of time to find its footing. This review is really bad, by the way. I'm literally just spouting off things off my head. But at the same time, though, the show just feels a bit messy in its early episodes, and it did feel a bit disjointed as well. Like, I'm not sure if anybody mentioned this, but each week, the first 4 weeks of watching Rings of Power, the first couple of weeks, should I say, of watching Rings of Power is kind of like, okay, the first episode, and then, you get the first 2 episodes, and then the third episode felt like it was kind of in a different show than the first 2 episodes. It kind of felt like we were going, okay, what's Rings of Power going to be like this week? It's going to be different than the last episode or similar to the last episode? You understand what I'm saying? It just felt a bit disjointed in like the overall tone of the show and the overall feel of the show. It felt like it was pulling all these different directions. Pardon me there, but the show kind of, like I said before, found its footing with episodes 5 and 6, but I felt that the show could have been a bit more, what am I trying to say here? I felt like it could have been a bit more coherent in its early episodes, because I felt it was trying to set up a lot really early on, and even to the point that there's some, plot lines that haven't even been touched on, since the first episode. Quite literally, like, when you see other Half-Orcs all picking berries, you see a wolf watching them, which I'm assuming is he was in the second Hobbit film. He's a guy who is a human, but he also transforms into a wolf as well. I'm assuming the shapeshifter. I'm assuming that was the shapeshifter, but we don't know. We haven't actually touched on that storyline since the first episode. So whether that was just like a little Easter egg, I don't know. A little Easter egg for fans of the Hobbit film to go, oh, that's the shapeshifter from the second Hobbit film. Maybe it is, but at the same time, though, it just felt like there's some plot lines that were left open because the show's trying to do so much earlier on, and when it eventually started to calm down a bit of episode 5, that's when I started to get into a lot more. Not that I didn't like the first 4 episodes, but I felt episode 5 was like the show I was looking for, I've got to admit. And also, I've spoken before about how I'm really looking forward to Series 2 because I feel it's going to be better than the first series of Rings of Power. But we're going to have to wait 2 flipping years for the second series of Rings of Power. I don't like that. And even though I like the show, a lot of people don't. And I do feel, a lot of people are a bit mixed in it. Like, and I don't feel that's the best when you have to wait 2 years for the next series. Like, I'm not sure if they should have made the first 2 seasons back to back, I'm going to be honest. But at the same time, though, if they did, I actually feel it would be benefiting them a bit better here. Because now I feel the show has found its footing. It's found its footing for like the last 3 episodes of the series, last 4 episodes of the series, should I say. But now we're going to have to wait 2 years. And hopefully in those 2 years they make something truly special. But in those 2 years, a lot's going to happen. A lot of other TV shows are going to come out. And I'm hoping it somehow maintains that momentum from the fandom of anticipating the next series, if you know what I mean. I'm hoping the anticipation still stays there, and I feel the show should be coming out the earliest January 2024. I know it won't. I know it won't come out till late 2024. But it needs to come out as soon as possible, because you need to build on everything that was good with this first series of Rings of Power. You need to build on all of that. And I'm not sure at the moment if having a 2-year gap between your first series and your second series is necessarily the best idea. But that's what's happening with Rings of Power, and hopefully the second series is a big payoff. And also, I do think the show could be more expansive. Like I've spoken a bit before, and so I'm kind of contradicting myself here. I know, I've spoken about before how the show feels like it's pulling all these different directions in the first couple of episodes, and that it's trying to do quite a lot, and it's a bit incoherent. But at the same time, though, it feels like it's just cutting to different locations. And, like, the things in the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings films, say a little about the Hobbit movies as well. They felt expansive. You had all these swooping, drone shots of the dwarves or of the Fellowship, travelling in those movies over these hills in New Zealand. Well, the hills in Middle-earth, and all these landscapes in Middle-earth, but in reality it was all done in New Zealand. And those shots always made the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films feel expansive and feel epic, if I use the term. I'm not always a big fan of the word epic, I'm not going to lie, but, they made those swooping aerial shots and made those movies feel grand. And I feel that Rings of Power doesn't necessarily have that. There are some swooping shots in there, but like when it's swooping shots of Numenor, it's kind of like CGI, and I feel they could have had more swooping shots and more. I just feel it could be more. I just feel that the show could have felt more epic. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm going on a bit, but I wanted to feel a bit more expansive, and I wanted to see different worlds and different places and different. I wanted to see more races as well, because one of the great things about the Hobbit movies, in my opinion, is the fact that you get to see all these different places that you didn't see in Lord of the Rings films. There's a couple of places you do get to see, but you get to see. There's a couple of places you get to see in the Hobbit films that were also in Lord of the Rings movies. Like, obviously, they go back to Riverdale, which is a place where the elves are, where Galadriel and Elrond are, and Sauron is in the Hobbit movie, in the first Hobbit film. But then you also get to go to the underground Goblin Kingdom, and you also get to go to the Dwarf Kingdom that's been taken over by Smaug. You also get to go see the spiders of Mirkwood Forest, and you get to go and see the elves in Mirkwood Forest. Well, you get to go and see all these different locations, and also what's the place? Lake Town as well. Lake Town, you get to go and see all these different places in the Hobbit films, which you didn't see in Lord of the Rings movies. It might be mentioned in Lord of the Rings films, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you understand what I'm saying, and you don't get that in Rings of Power. As far as, well, you do, but it doesn't feel like you do. It doesn't feel like they're exploring more places. It feels like they're trying to keep it in certain locations. And I feel the end of the series, and spoiler here in case you haven't seen the series as well, another spoiler here, my third spoiler of this podcast, I feel the end of the last episode with, that half-up going off with Gandalf, I feel that could develop more on this whole idea of making the show more expansive and just visiting different locations that we haven't seen in Middle-earth yet. Because at the moment, a lot of the show feels familiar. It feels, like its own thing, but it also feels familiar. And I want it to feel more epic. That's what I want it to feel more. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying there. Again, my head's in a different place right now, I'm not gonna lie. But, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. And by the way, one thing I haven't mentioned is when you see that half-up going off with Gandalf in the last episode, I literally just think, oh, it's the first Hobbit film all over again. It's a Hobbit and Unexpected Journey all over again, because that's literally what happens with Bilbo and Gandalf in the first Hobbit film. But, I'm not going to lie, that made me smile. I mean, the whole series made me smile, which is one thing I mentioned. Every episode had me grinning from ear to ear, for the most part. And yeah, I really liked it about it. And also, is there anything else? Oh yeah, the whole thing through Tolkien. I haven't actually mentioned this yet, and I should have probably had on the podcast. But, that's the sort of person who I am. I'm not a particularly organised person when it comes to doing these podcasts. I do put a lot of thought into them, but at the same time, though, they could be better organised. I'm not going to lie. But one thing I haven't mentioned, is that I've never read a Tolkien book in my life. I did say this in my video on the YouTube channel that I made on my anticipation for Rings of Power, how I'm kind of worried about it, and why I'm not excited for the show as I want to be. I did mention that I've never read, pardon me there, I've never read any of the Hobbit films or any Lord of the Rings films in the past. But at the same time, though, I have seen the films, and so for me, this show, for me, Rings of Power did feel like an extension of the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies. It did feel like Lord of the Rings to me. But like I said before, I've never read a Tolkien book in my life, so I'm just assessing this as somebody who doesn't know Tolkien's work, who has never, like I said this, a couple of times already, I've never read a Tolkien book, and so I'm just going into this as someone who is a big fan of Lord of the Rings films, big fan of the Hobbit movies as well, and just hoping for something good. And at the same time, though, that's what I got from it. I got something that was good. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I don't know Tolkien's work, and I can understand some people being unhappy with this adaptation of Tolkien's work. I understand people being unhappy with how Rings of Power is adapted from Tolkien's work, but at the same time, though, an adaptation is an adaptation in the end, and it's not going to be completely accurate to the source material. From what I've heard, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films aren't, and yet those movies, the final film, Return of the King, won like 11 Oscars, like I've already mentioned. But from what I've heard, a lot of the Lord of the Rings films, a lot of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, take liberties from the Lord of the Rings book. Like, you have, there's a character called like Tom Bombadil, who's not even in the films, who is apparently quite a key character in the first Lord of the Rings book. And also, a lot of the three Hobbit movies is obviously not in the Hobbit book. Like, the Hobbit book is a small book. It's smaller than the Fellowship of the Ring book, but, the Hobbit movies are 3-hour movies each, and even longer if you watch the extended versions, like I do. So, you get the point I'm making. Those films took a lot of liberties with the source material. They didn't always rely on the source material, and that was fine with me, because it's an adaptation. And so, I do feel all these people get annoyed with, Rings of Power not being close to the source material is a bit like, yes, because it's an adaptation. Adaptations are meant to take liberties. There's a reason a film isn't a book, and there's a reason a book isn't a film. They're different mediums. And, I'm not by any means saying that the books aren't good. I've never read them, so I wouldn't know. But it's fine that Rings of Power is different. It's fine. And, all these people online as well complaining that Rings of Power isn't a good adaptation of Tolkien's work. Well, from what I've heard, neither is the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films either. So much of the Tolkien estate weren't that happy. I think Tolkien's son wasn't really that happy with the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films, and yet they're beloved. I love them. So I just feel there's people complaining that, again, for the sake of complaining. There's a reason a film is in a book, and there's a reason a book is in a film. I hope you understand the point I'm trying to make there. But anyway, I did like the show, though. I did really enjoy it. And I know people have problems with the character of Galadriel, played by Moyford Clark. Well, the thing is, I never had a problem with Galadriel. I really enjoyed watching that character, I'm going to be honest. I do feel the character could have been written a bit better, and maybe had some more emotional depth. But I do think we'll see that as the series goes on as well. But I also feel, people criticising Moyford Clark's performance as Galadriel. Moyford Clark, and I might pronounce her name wrong, but Moyford Clark is, she's a great actress. If you don't believe me, watch the British horror film Saint Maud. She is chilling in that film. She is harrowing, and she encapsulates the claustrophobic and really tense feel of that movie. And she is a great actress from what I've seen in Saint Maud, and I really enjoy her performance in this show. I just wish you were going to get more of a time to shine, because a lot of people are criticizing her performance, and in the end, you should never, you should, but at the same time, though, a performance from an actor or an actress is just what the showrunners or what the director wants from them, and I feel that Moyford Clark did the best with what the showrunner probably wanted from her in the character Galadriel. And I did enjoy watching that character. I don't understand people's problem with her. Like, she's good in the show, I enjoy her. And also, I did love episodes 5 and 6, sorry. I really loved episodes 5 and 6. I thought it was really well shot, really well directed. G.A. Bonnier, who directed films like The Impossible, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, sorry, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and also, he died to something else. Well, A Monster Calls, he died to the first couple episodes, and I feel that you can see that sort of direction from those movies in those episodes as well, which I really liked. Also, I'm a big fan of the music for the show as well. Like, the music for the Lord of the Rings songs and the Hobbit movies, and by the way, I've been doing a lot of comparing with Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings songs, which I didn't expect to, I'm going to be honest, but, you know, the reason I'm doing that is because those movies mean so much to me, so I'm going to compare them because they're both Lord of the Rings properties, and even so there might not be a fair comparison to some people, I'm not comparing them as like, okay, the Lord of the Rings films are better than the Hobbit films. I'm not doing that. Well, I am kind of doing that, I'm not going to lie, but I am. But, at the same time, though, I'm also saying that Rings of Power is good. I'm not discrediting Rings of Power. I'm not saying, well, it was done better in the Lord of the Rings films. I understand that the Lord of the Rings films are better, but Rings of Power is still good in my opinion. So, yes, I'm comparing them, but I still like both quite a lot. In fact, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, and I think Rings of Power is great. But, the thing about what I was saying before, the music in the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies is amazing in my opinion. Honestly, every time you hear that piece of music concerning Hobbits by Howard Shore, I'm transported back into Middle-earth. It's a perfectly immersive piece of music. It's a beautiful piece of music. And, you know, the music of Rings of Power had a lot to do. You know, there's a lot of weight on the music of Rings of Power showed because the scores for the Lord of the Rings films are just impeccable in my opinion. So, Bear McCreary doing the score for this show had a lot to live up to. And I feel he did a really good job. Like I should say, as well, Howard Shore, who did the music for Lord of the Rings, for the music for the Hobbit movies, did the main theme for Rings of Power. And I really love the main theme, though, because it feels magical, and it just has a sense like it's enchanting you into the world of the Rings of Power, just in the opening title. So I do think Howard Shore's opening title theme for the show is really good. But also, I love Bear McCreary's score for the show as well. Like, even so, the motif, the theme, if you will, for the main theme for Galadriel is a bit overused in my opinion. You know, bum 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 bum. It's used so many times throughout the show, and there's so many times in each episode that you know, if you ever did a drinking game, you'd have the time of your life doing that one. You'd probably be drunk out of your mind by the time you get to each episode of how many times Galadriel's theme's used in there, even though it does use Galadriel's theme way too many times in my opinion. I still really love the music because it felt like Middle-earth music. Pardon me there, I just burped a little bit while I was talking. But yeah, it felt like Middle-earth music, and I loved that about it. And, you know, it felt, again, like an extension to the Lord of the Rings films in terms of the music. It felt like it was Howard Shore passing the baton on to Bear McCreary, which he probably quite literally did when they were doing the score for this show. And it sounds like Lord of the Rings to me. Every single time I hear that half-foot theme, you know, I forgot, bum bum ba da da da. Every single time I hear that Harfoot theme, I'm like, okay, that's a Harfoot theme from Rings of Power. And every single time, even though, you know, I've heard it loads of times, I don't really hear it, I don't really need to hear it again for the next 2 years, but every single time I hear Galadriel's theme from the show, I go, okay, that's Galadriel's theme. It sounds like Lord of the Rings to me, and I really liked it about it. And yeah, I think Bear McCreary did a great job with the score for Rings of Power. Sure, it's not as good as Howard Shore's scores for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, but it's still a pretty great score if you ask me. And, you know, I just feel the show is really fun. I really like it. And it's not amazing. And it's not my favourite series of the year so far. And sure, it's got a lot of problems, and sure, it took 4 episodes, in my opinion, to really find its footing, but I did still enjoy watching those 4 episodes. I didn't hate watch them, and some people, you know, when the first episode came out, saying, oh my god, it's really slow, and I found it really hard to get through, it was really tedious, and like, I watched the first episode pretty late in the day. I was like, this isn't slow, this is fun, this is constantly got something happening. Granted, it's pulling all these different directions, but there's always something happening in the first episode, and I felt that about the second episode as well. Even though it was a bit incoherent, there was always something happening, and it did keep me interested. I didn't find the first 4 episodes as compelling as I wanted them to be, but I was still interested in them, and I was still interested where the story was going, and I was still interested where the series was going, and ultimately, I enjoyed where the first series ended. I liked where the first series ended, and I do feel the second series could be even better than the first because it can build on everything that was so good about the first series and just make it even better and just make it amazing. Hopefully it is, because I'm going to have to wait 2 flipping years for the second season of Rings of Power, which is a bit annoying, but nonetheless, like I said before, I would probably compare Rings of Power to the Willow film. It feels like a comforting, fun fantasy adventure. Like, every episode I watched had me smiling from ear to ear for the most part. I enjoy these episodes, and, you know, they're not amazing TV, it's not brilliant TV, but it's TV that's fun. And that works for me, because sometimes I just want a fun TV show to watch. I can understand why this show would, you know, frustrate some Tolkien fans. I can understand that. I can understand why some people, you know, some die-hard Lord of the Rings fans might be frustrated by this show. I'm personally not. As much as I love Lord of the Rings films, you know, I'm not a die-hard fan of them. I love Lord of the Rings films because I love the filmmaking of them and things like that. I love how just epic and immersive it feels. And so, when I sit down to watch Rings of Power, I'm not too bothered about all the stuff to do with the lore. I'm more bothered about where it's going to feel immersive, how the filmmaking's done. I'm interested in the characters. Do I find the plot compelling, and all that sort of stuff? And your answer is yeah, I do. I really like all the stuff in the show. Could it be better? Yes, I've said that about a million times. It could be better, but what it is, I like it. I enjoyed it. It's satisfying. It's fun, and it's got some exciting moments. It's got some great moments. And when we finally get to the meat of the story in episode 5, I was like, that's just what I want to see. And so from episode 5 onwards, I was like, yes, I really like the show because this is the show I want. It's not for everyone, but you know what? It is for me. It's a fancy show that has optimism in there, and it's got a sense of joy. And for me, it worked. And so for that reason, I'm going to say the Rings of Power. You know what? I'm feeling generous. I'm going to say that it's a 7.8 out of 10. I'm not going to give it an 8 out of 10 because I don't love it. And I kind of wish I did love it. I have said that already. I kind of wish I did love it. I said that at the start of this review of Rings of Power. But at the same time, though, I'm just happy I like it because I don't, you know, I understand why some people don't, but I do at the same time think that people look for problems in shows nowadays and look for problems in films, and I do that as well. I'm a culprit of that as well. I do that all the time with big blockbusters. So I do feel there's some people just looking for problems in this show, though, and I don't feel that's fair. You know, every show has problems, and every show has some episodes which are better than others. That happens with every single TV show. And so I do feel the criticism that some Rings of Power is getting is a bit unfair, I'm not gonna lie. And so I'm just happy that I like it because I was afraid that I wouldn't. I even made a video on my YouTube channel talking about how I might not like this show, how I was worried about that I wasn't gonna like it, but I came out of the series going, you know what, that was great, it worked for me, I really liked it, it was, you know, it was good enough. And I'm happy about that. I'm not a die-hard Lord of the Rings fan, I should reiterate, and I'm not also someone who has immersed myself in the works Tolkien by any means, but for me, Rings of Power put a smile on my face, and it works because I did find it delightful, I did find it compelling when it wanted to be, and I just, yeah, I enjoyed it, and I kind of wish the second series was coming out tomorrow, because I feel the second series is going to be brilliant, and we're going to have to wait 2 flipping years for it. But, you know, that shows you that it's left on a high note for me, though, at the same time, because the fact that I just can't wait for the second series shows you that the first series worked to me, particularly the end of the first series and the setup of the second series, because I want to see where it goes. And for me, it can only get better. Fingers crossed it can only get better anyway. And yeah, I really like Rings of Power, and like I said before, I would give it a 7.8 out of 10. And so, that was my rambling review of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Hopefully you understood some of the points, I can't even speak. Hopefully you understood some of the points I was making there. You know, I know I ramble on, I know I don't make my points the best, but you've got to bear in mind, I'm really exhausted today, and I am trying my best right now. I even still got my notes right there. Sometimes just the what happens between the brain and the mouth isn't always the best, and I don't even know what I say half the time. And so when I'm listening to these podcasts back, or when I'm doing editing videos, I just sometimes go, what the hell was I going on about? But yeah, hopefully my review of Rings of Power, and let me know your thoughts on Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power in the comment section below, and whether you enjoyed it or not. But before this podcast is ended, before I end this podcast, should I say before this podcast ends, and quickly, and I mean quickly, because this podcast has already reached the hour mark. So before the podcast ends, I'm going to quickly talk about She-Hulk. And this is what I'm going to say. That's it. I'm done with the Marvel Disney Plus shows. I don't care about them anymore. Pardon me there. I don't care about them anymore. I still care about the Star Wars Disney Plus shows, because I've enjoyed them all to varying degrees. Granted, they're not the greatest piece of TV ever, but I've enjoyed them all. But the Marvel Disney Plus shows just keep annoying me. The only one I've actually thought was okay was Loki Season 1. And I did think Loki Season 1 had some big problems, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, though, it felt like it embraced its identity more than all the other Marvel Disney Plus shows. WandaVision did that at the start, but then by the end it was just, big CGI fights, and I was like, let's appease the Marvel audience, because we forgot to earlier on, so let's get the Marvel formula back in there. Come on, we have to, because we're Disney, I'm a Marvel, because that's what we do. And Falcon and the Soldier is just a large, forgettable show, in my opinion. And also, Miss Marvel was fine. I didn't hate Miss Marvel, but they had a whole section of Miss Marvel where they went back to Pakistan and got to learn all the stuff in the past with, how Miss Marvel's grandparents exist. And I'm like, why is this? Miss Marvel started off well. This young Pakistan-American girl gets some powers. How's she going to deal with that with her family? How's she going to deal with being in school? And then it goes to Pakistan. I'm like, what is all this? You open up different realms? I don't care anymore. Moon Knight started well, got an interesting concept. What about this person who fell asleep? He woke up and he was in this, superhero body. That's all interesting. By the end of Moon Knight, I was like, what the hell happened? Don't fully understand what was going on there. And that's the same with She-Hulk. She-Hulk starts with some interesting ideas. Okay, this woman, she gets the Hulk powers. How does she deal with them? How does she deal with losing a job? How does she deal with dating? This is actually not a bad idea, in my opinion. But She-Hulk fails, and I mean fails in its execution. There's some interesting ideas in there, like I've already mentioned, and I do feel what they tried to go for in the last episode was a good idea, but the problem was the execution. Like in the last episode, and spoilers here for She-Hulk, in case you haven't seen it yet, in the last episode of She-Hulk, it's all meta, and she literally quite literally breaks the fourth wall, and it's like, okay, what? Okay, that's fine. What are you doing? Okay, that's not bad. Okay, Kevin is kind of interesting, and if you've seen the last episode of She-Hulk over to time with me, and he's like, okay, I want to fix my finale. I want to have it less messy, and then they go back to the episode though, and then she ends like that. Honestly, the last episode of She-Hulk was so rushed. I didn't even know what it was, and I feel all the performances are good on the show. I feel Tatiana Maslany is great as She-Hulk. I enjoy seeing Tim Roth back as the Abomination, because I really like Tim Roth as an actor. Was in Pulp Fiction, as well as Dogs. I really like him as an actor, and also I like seeing Michael Thor as a Hulk. But that scene, by the way, when the scene where they introduced, Hulk's son in the last episode, was kind of like he shows up at family dinner. Hulk, I'm Hulk. Oh, by the way, I've got a son. It's like, what's this? And also, by the way, I enjoyed Charlie Cox's Daredevil. I should say, I've never seen the Netflix Daredevil TV show, but I like Daredevil on this show, but I felt that the episode with him is a bit overrated. Some people said it's one of the greatest episodes of any Disney Plus show ever. It's not. It was way too quick and had a lot of big problems, and I don't like the fact that Daredevil was CGI when he's doing all of these big moves. I understand that might be in the comics, but I've already spoken about adaptation in this video, and the comics are not the movies, and the movies are not the comics. Make them different, and that's fine. But I've heard Marvel does that all the time, so I just, oh god, and this series as well, She-Hulk had filler episodes. Why did it have filler episodes for a 9-episode TV show? I understand, I see some people online say, well, the best American sitcoms do, and She-Hulk is trying to be an American sitcom. I understand that, but, the best American sitcoms, whether it's Frasier, Friends, The Office, Parks and Recreation, Friends, Prince of Bel-Air, yes, they have filler episodes, but at the same time, those filler episodes are in 20 plus episode seasons. So those shows can't afford to have filler episodes. Those shows can't afford to have episodes where characters go off to a different location for one episode and they do something a bit wacky. She-Hulk can't, because it's 9 episodes. There's one episode where she goes to a wedding. I'm like, what's this? Why? Because it's a filler episode. Okay. well, you can't really afford to have one full episode and then you have another full episode when you literally see her, you know, getting ready to have a new dress. I'm like, what is this? You can see my frustration with the show as well, because I want it to be good. I want to come out of all these Marvel Disney Plus shows and say, that was brilliant. But at the same time, though, they all feel inconsequential, and they all feel like you have to watch them at the same time in order to understand what's going to happen in the movies. Like, you know, I don't understand how people would have felt who hadn't watched WandaVision watched Doctor Strange 2, because in the end, for me, WandaVision was just one big setup for Doctor Strange 2. And that film really underwhelmed me, I'm not going to lie. You know, Doctor Strange 2 did. So, I just feel like I have to watch all these shows and understand what's going to happen in the movie. And I don't want to feel that. I don't want to watch these shows just to do that, though. And so, I'm giving up on the shows. And what I'm going to do in the future is one of these characters from one of the Marvel Disney Plus shows one of the Marvel films. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to view it as somebody who hasn't seen one of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And I feel I'm going to be infuriating. I don't feel that's good storytelling, you know, making your audience watch every single piece of Marvel content, because it's overproducing. There's so much of it right now, you know, it's constantly there. When something ends Marvel-wise, I know things right around the corner, quite literally. Like, Miss Marvel ended, She-Hulk comes out a couple of weeks after. You know, while She-Hulk is out, Werewolf by Night comes out, which is like the TV movie that Marvel's made for Halloween. And then right around the corner, you got Black Panther 2 coming out in the next couple of weeks. And then after that, the Guardians Christmas Special. 2 months after that, not even 2 months really, Secret Invasion comes out. And, you know, then you got Ant-Man 3. Then after that, you've got, I'm lost track, you know. You get the point I'm making. It's just really, really, just, it's really draining the life out of me. That's what it is, because I'm starting all these shows and it's taking me, I don't know. It's just really annoying me, because even the Marvel stuff that I've liked in the past, you know, that I'm looking forward to as well, like, I'm really looking forward to the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas Special and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, because I'm a huge fan of the previous 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I'm not as excited for them as I want to be, because I feel like Marvel's always there, and so I can't get too excited for those movies, because it's going to be another piece of the ongoing incomplete jigsaw puzzle, which will be the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It'll always be incomplete, and I don't like the fact that, you know, Francis Ford Coppola did an interview a couple of months ago now, and he was talking about comic book cinema nowadays, and this isn't just Marvel, it's comic book cinema is always there. It's like the old Hollywood studio system during the 1930s, like the 1960s, or like the late 1950s or something like that. You know, it's always there. Like back in the old Hollywood studio system, if the one genre film worked, like the Western, they make loads of Westerns, and that's what they're doing now. Obviously the comic book genre works, so they're just overproducing. That's what Marvel's doing. They know people like Marvel stuff, so they're just going to keep making it over and over again, and I just don't care anymore. I'm going to stop watching all the Marvel Disney Plus shows, because they just end up really annoying me. You can tell my frustration. And I thought Werewolf by Night was okay. I thought it came out at the wrong time, not gonna lie. Like, Werewolf by Night was the other latest Marvel thing, which came out like on the 7th of October, and was directed by Michael Giacchino, who's actually predominantly a music composer from like The Incredibles, the late Planet of the Apes films. Also, he did the music for the Batman, he did music for No Way Home, he did the music for the first Doctor Strange. He's done loads of pieces of music, Star Trek movies, Mission Impossible, and you know, all these different sort of stuff. Michael Giacchino, who's, you know, predominantly, like I said before, music composer, directed Werewolf by Night, and I think he did a good job. I think that special, Werewolf by Night, the Marvel presentation, whatever it was called, you know, I felt that was overshadowed by She-Hulk, because there's just so much coming out. And Werewolf by Night was okay, and I'm looking forward to Guardians 3, and I'm looking forward to the Guardians Christmas Special, but everything else I can kind of take or leave. I'll watch Loki Season 2, because I enjoyed Loki Season 1, but even that I don't think is going to be brilliant. God, yeah. And She-Hulk kind of encapsulates all of that. It's just, they made, what it is in the show, what it is in the end, She-Hulk is a show that is made by fans. It's an expensive fan-made show that's made for hardcore fans, and I really couldn't care less about that. I'm not a hardcore Marvel fan, and I can't see non-hardcore Marvel fans enjoying the show, I'm not going to lie. But if you enjoy it, that's what matters the most. I'm just this lonely loser on a YouTube channel talking about my annoyance with Marvel, which I always do every now and then. So if you like She-Hulk, that's what matters the most. And just because I don't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't. And personally, I'm going to say that She-Hulk, if I was going to give it a rating, I'd probably say 2 out of 10. But at the same time, no, you know, I can see why some people would like it if you're a hardcore Marvel fan, because it's got a lot of nudges to the hardcore Marvel fans going, oh, what are we doing here? Oh, we got Daredevil, we got Abomination, we got Hulk's son. I was like, but for me, it's just another Marvel Disney Plus show which feels inconsequential at the end of the day, and that should have been so much better, and just really didn't work for me. I didn't think it was terrible, but it was an expensive fan-made show. That's what it felt like. They aimed to make a mediocre show at best, and that's what they did. So there's my thoughts on She-Hulk. Pretty bad, but if you like it, good for you. And so that is it for the Night Podcast on the Night at the Movies channel. That is it for the Night Podcast today, guys, people. I'm slurring on my words and I'm getting really tired now, so I'm going to round things off. Thank you as always for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. Hopefully you understand the points I made on Rings of Power and She-Hulk. And at the same time, though, look forward to the next podcast, which hopefully comes sometime next week, if I find time to do it. And also, hope I have a Halloween podcast planned close to Halloween as well, which hopefully I'm going to have some special guests on. So yes, look forward to all that coming to the channel very soon. And also look forward to many more both film and TVs coming on this channel very soon. And also, if you are watching this, or should I say, listening to this on Spotify, thank you so much. And if you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much. And do feel free to like and subscribe down below. And yes, see you guys again soon. And thank you, but bye for now. Bye.